Joann Fabrics, your childhood favorite, is shutting down all 800 locations. It started as a small family shop in 1943 and turned into a go-to spot for fabric and crafts. Joann Fabrics pushed through its early days, beat out competitors, and even survived the pandemic. But after all these years, it's falling apart. Billions of dollars are gone, thousands of workers are out of jobs, and a business that once dominated the fabric market is closing for good. It made it through recessions and changing shopping trends, but in the end, all these weren't enough to save it. All Joann stores are shutting their doors, and longtime customers can't believe it's really happening. So how did it all go so wrong? How does a company that lasted this long just collapse? Let's get into the full story of Joann Fabrics and what really led to its fall. And please, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and like this video. So, where were we? That's right, Joann Fabrics. Well, Joann Fabrics started as a small family-run fabric store in Cleveland, Ohio in 1943. The Reich and Rohrbach families opened it when most fabric shops were just little places that served people who sewed their own clothes and home decorations. Fabric was in demand, and their first store, called Cleveland Fabric Shop, offered a variety of fabrics to meet the needs of local customers. As more people got into sewing, demand grew, and the business expanded. The owner saw a chance to grow and started opening more stores. They wanted to make it easier for customers to find all the fabric and sewing supplies they needed in one place. Back then, sewing at home was common, and having a store with everything in one spot made shopping more convenient. In 1963, they changed the name to Joann Fabrics, using the names of the founders' daughters, Joan and Jacqueline Ann. They must have loved their girls so much, and as a father to a daughter myself, I sure do. Well, this was around the time Joann Fabrics really started taking off. More stores opened, and it became everyone's favorite place for fabric and crafts. People who loved sewing and making clothes at home knew the name, and it built a solid reputation. By 1969, Joann Fabrics had 18 locations, and the owners decided to take it public. They listed on the stock market under the name Fabric Centers of America Incorporated, which, in turn, gave them the money to expand even more. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, they kept opening stores across the country, making it easier for people to find fabric and supplies for their projects. Joann Fabrics took off because it paid attention to what their clients wanted. Back in the 90s, stores were improving, and Joann didn't want to be left behind. In 1994, it bought Cloth World, which helped to open more stores and reach more customers who were into sewing and crafts. But this was just the start. A few years later, in 1998, Joann made another huge step and bought House of Fabrics. These deals weren't just about adding more locations, they also helped Joann connect with more shoppers. With more stores and a growing number of customers, Joann decided to go big. Literally, like real big. It rolled out superstores, huge locations packed with fabric, sewing supplies, craft materials, and home decor. They could now supply everything clients wanted. The Joann stores made life easier for shoppers who wanted more choices without running around to different places. And it wasn't just the die-hard crafters who showed up. Beginners and people just looking for a fun project started coming in too. To make sure everyone knew about its superstores, Joann put a lot of effort into marketing, as you do with a business, making sure people saw it as the best spot for all things sewing, crafting, and home decorating. Joann Fabrics had been doing well for years, but things started getting rough when shopping habits changed. In the 2000s, big stores like Walmart and Target began selling fabric and craft supplies for less money, giving people cheaper places to shop. Customers who had always gone to Joann now had other options that were easier on their wallets. It wasn't just the big stores causing trouble, online shopping was becoming more common. Websites like Amazon and smaller craft shops made it easy for people to buy fabric and supplies without leaving the house. And let's be honest, how many of us would love to just stay home and live under a rock? Just me? Alright, moving on. With so many choices just a few clicks away, fewer shoppers felt the need to drive to a Joann store. Running a huge chain of stores came with its own problems. Keeping shelves full and making sure every location had what people needed wasn't always smooth. Have you ever gone to a store expecting to find something and left empty-handed? I mean, this was happening too often, and customers were getting frustrated enough to shop elsewhere. Besides that, running physical stores cost a lot more than selling online, making it hard to compete on price. Joann tried to get into online sales, but it took too long to catch up. Other companies had already made online shopping quick and simple, leaving Joann stuck playing catch-up. A big problem was that people just weren't into sewing and crafting like they used to be. Sure, some folks still did it, but not as often. With fewer customers coming in, Joann had a harder time keeping business steady. Younger shoppers weren't too interested in making their own clothes or decorations. They preferred to just buy ready-made stuff instead. Joann tried mixing things up and adding new products to bring in more shoppers, but not every idea worked out the way they had hoped. Then the economy took a hit. When the 2008 financial crisis happened, I was a teenager, I remember this thoroughly, people started cutting back on things that weren't absolutely necessary, like hobbies and crafts. Have you ever skipped buying something fun because money was tight? Again, I was a teenager in 2008. I was very familiar with skipping out on things I wanted because money was tight. That's exactly what a lot of people did, and Joann's sales took a big hit. The company stayed open, but business never really got back to where it was before. On top of all that, costs kept going up: rent, wages, materials, all of it. To keep up, Joann had to raise prices every now and then, but that just pushed even more customers away. People started looking for cheaper places to shop, and Joann struggled to hold on to them. In 2011, a private equity firm called Leonard Green & Partners bought Joann Fabrics for $1.6 billion with a B. This meant the company was no longer publicly traded, giving it the freedom to make changes without having to answer to outside investors. Even with new ownership, a lot of the same problems stuck around. Debt was piling up, and competition from big box stores and online sellers only got worse. Joann Fabrics tried to stay relevant with new products and marketing efforts, but making a steady profit wasn't easy. By the time the 2020s rolled around, things had only gotten harder. When COVID-19 hit, Joann Fabrics got a temporary boost because more people were stuck at home and picked up sewing and crafting. Remember how everyone was making their own masks back then? Where do you think they got the product? That helped sales, but just for a bit. It didn't last. Once things opened back up, sales started dropping again. The company tried to grow its online store, but going up against big e-commerce companies that already dominated the market was a tough fight. Joann Fabrics hit a rough patch in 2024 and had to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The company blamed money problems, heavy debt, and tough competition. At first, they planned to close about 500 stores while trying to keep the rest open. However, a few days back, things got worse, and Joann Fabrics announced it would shut down all 800 locations. GA Group took over what was left, and after that, there wasn't a real way to keep the business going. The shutdown is a huge blow to workers and shoppers. About 19,000 employees, both full-time and part-time, would lose their jobs. A lot of them had been there for years and built their careers around it. Can you imagine putting in so much time at a job, learning the ins and outs, getting accustomed to your coworkers and regular shoppers, only for it all to vanish overnight? Shoppers who depended on Joann Fabrics for sewing and craft supplies were frustrated, to say the least. Some turned to online options, but plenty of people were upset to lose a store that had been part of their towns for so long. Joann Fabrics struggled to stay afloat as more people turned to online shopping and buying habits kept shifting. The store used to be a go-to spot for sewing and craft lovers, but over time, it couldn't keep up with the changes in how people shop. Big box stores had lower prices, the company had trouble running things efficiently, and it was slow to grow its online business. It played a big role in American crafting culture, but its story is a reminder that even well-known brands have to keep changing if they want to stick around. Well, this was another interesting rise and fall story. You know the saying, the higher the rise, the harder the fall.